Story 1. Being poor is very expensive. The stress of constantly managing finances can be exhausting. People who are not wealthy desire the same opportunities for their children that affluent families seek for theirs. Story 2. That affordability changes your priorities significantly. I often encounter people who cannot afford a car repair, and those who are better off are often perplexed by their willingness to take risks. I have had to discuss affordability more times than I would like. Customers sometimes decline brake services because they prefer to pay rent and take their chances, not because they are simply being frugal. Story 3. A quick windfall is quickly spent because there is always something you need but have been postponing. A short disaster can lead to debt that takes much longer to pay off, such as life with limited income. Story 4. Being poor isn't a result of being lazy. My parents worked incredibly hard and continue to do so. They work harder than anyone I know, yet they are still poor. Story 5. The guilt that comes with being poor is overwhelming. You do everything in your power, yet it's still not enough. Everyone advises that if you just work hard enough, you'll earn enough money. This is not true. Hard work in low socioeconomic jobs leads to more effort without advancement. You remain in the same position because no one else can match your output. There's no pay raise either, as you are seen as just doing the same job as everyone else. Story 6. Having to walk somewhere because I didn't have money for public transit was challenging. I worked as a waitress and broke my leg, which forced me to live on next to nothing for 6 weeks. To get my very limited groceries, I used my crutches and managed the 30-minute round trip to the store and back. Story 7. It is not as easy to change your situation as everyone makes it out to be. It is often not about making bad choices or being bad with money. Story 8. Being too poor to afford a third trip overseas for the year is not the same as living off the same 2 vegetables for 2 weeks. Story 9. When they say, if you can't afford to pay cash, you can't afford it. Yeah, well, try going without a fridge, a water heater, and air conditioning in Florida. Those are the last 3 things I had to put on a credit card. Story 10. They love the phrase, we have the same 24 hours. But I don't have someone to do my laundry, make my dinner, or clean my house. Story 11. I would like people to understand what it's like to need medical care and be unable to access it. Navigating free clinics and community health centers involves facing numerous administrative obstacles, long wait lists, and inadequate service. Receiving minimal or no preventative care as you age is a serious concern. It becomes even more challenging if you require mental health services. Remember when Celia on Weeds transitioned from a private drug rehabilitation facility to a publicly funded one? Story 12. We are not envious of your material possessions. We are envious of the stability and security that wealth provides. Story 13. You cannot invest your savings in stocks or any other ventures when you have no savings. The reason we do not have savings is not due to minor expenses. Story 14. A strong middle class significantly expands the economy and increases wealth, benefiting everyone. Story 15. Not experiencing minor and major inconveniences makes you out of touch with us and how most people live. We are doing the best we can with what we have. Often, those choices seem unreasonable, incorrect, or unimaginable. However, we are just selecting the best option from the worst each time and trying to manage it all. It is extremely stressful. Story 16. It is overly simplistic, but I always use the toilet paper example. When it is on sale, people with money can stock up. Poor people cannot do that. They have to buy what they can when they need it. Being poor is expensive. Story 17. My friend told me that houses are being built in the city, and they will be ready in about a year with only a $30,000 down payment. I have $35,000 in student loan debt and virtually no savings. Where do you think I will find $30,000 for a down payment on a house in the next year? 5-figure purchases and payments are not something that most people can easily manage. Story 18. Your materialism means nothing to me. I am unimpressed by your luxury cars, expensive clothing, and large mansions. Story 19. Most people would prefer to have a stable job rather than rely on welfare. I would like wealthy individuals to understand that being on welfare and participating in other programs involves considerable effort. The paperwork can be overwhelming, and applicants must go through interviews repeatedly. Occasionally, you may spend your last dollar on transportation to the Department of Social and Health Services, only to find that they are too busy to see you that day. Consequently, not only do you go without food assistance, but you may also lack money to return home or to come back the next day. Story 20. They will never understand the constant stress that comes with being poor. Every day is a worry. Which bill should I pay and which bill can I pay late? I never get to go on vacation, and I don't make unnecessary purchases. Finally, they will never understand that the current economic system which they support is specifically designed to keep poor and working-class people down. Story 21. I wish they would understand the meaning of the word starvation. They have no clue what it's like to go without 3 meals a day. I never had 3 meals a day at home. I was lucky to get 2 meals a day. 1 meal was more like it, if that. Some days, the only meal I got was the free lunch they provided at school. They have no idea what it's like to watch television and see commercials for various food products and food scenes in movies and shows while on an empty, growling belly. It usually drove me up a wall. When I was 12, my mother managed to secure a great deal on an apartment in a 2-family house in a neighborhood that was definitely middle to upper class. It was one of the very nicest neighborhoods in the city. We were way out of our element there. In fact, we were the outcasts of the neighborhood. We were the poorest family in the area. We were the only family on welfare in the neighborhood. Out of the many kids in the area, my siblings and I were the only ones being raised by a single parent. All the other kids had 2 parents. While we were the poorest in the neighborhood, our next-door neighbor must have been the richest person there. He owned a successful demolition company and the 2-family house where he and his family lived. They resided in their first-floor apartment and basement while renting out their second-floor apartment. They owned a house in Florida and a fleet of cars that they replaced every 1 or 2 years. When his oldest son got married, he bought him a 2-family house across and down the street. My sister and brother made friends with a couple of their children. They would come home with tales of their wealth and all the nice things they owned. I had never been inside their home, but I could see into their dining room from our windows. The furnishings were so opulent, fancy, and expensive. I would bet that their dining room furnishings alone cost more than everything we owned in the entire world. My brother once told me how their mother went grocery shopping once a week and spent a minimum of $100 each time, sometimes as much as over $200. In our home, our mother went grocery shopping only once every 2 to 3 weeks and spent around $10 to $12 on food. The most she would ever spend was $20. It was a big deal to us kids if she spent a whole $20 on groceries. One time, the rich neighbor's youngest child was hanging out with my brother at our house when he decided to go to the toy store to buy himself some new toys. My brother tagged along. A couple of hours later, they both came back with a huge armload of toys, mostly Transformer toys that were very popular at the time, and deposited them on our table. My brother's friend, who was about 8 years old while I was 9 years older, then took out his cash change from one pocket and his wallet from the other pocket to transfer his change into his wallet. I was standing right behind him as he opened his wallet. My eyes widened. Inside were $50 bills, $20 bills, and some 10s. Lots of them, lots of 50s and 20s, a very thick wad. I don't recall seeing any 5s or 1s until he stuck his change into his wallet. Then he had some 5s and 1s in there. I don't know the exact amount he had, but it was definitely more than enough cash to cover our rent and groceries for at least 6 months. Imagine an 8-year-old walking around with that much money. More than most adults. All the cash I had on me at that moment was a meager 3 cents, 3 pennies, which literally represented all the money I had in the world. I didn't even own a wallet. What for? I never had enough money to necessitate the need for one. Later, my brother and his friend left, taking the toys with them. I went straight to my bedroom, dug the 3 pennies out of my pocket, slammed them down on top of my dresser, and stared at them. They were all tarnished and lacked even the decency to be shiny. Being poor is difficult. It's even harder when you have real-life rich people living next door, contrasting your life with theirs. Story 22. Poverty often breeds more poverty. I understand that generally a more expensive pair of shoes will save me money in the long run, but what I can afford now is the $15 to $20 shoes from Walmart. It is expensive to live in my area, but it's even more expensive to move. My only option at that point would be to be voluntarily homeless, which would present a myriad of other problems and make things more expensive than they are now. Every time I save up even a small amount of money, something happens. Could be the water heater breaking or the furnace failing. It's cheaper in the moment to repair my old car than to buy a new or better one. I liken it to the shoe issue. I can't ask my parents for a loan because, in this case, I'm actually taking care of them or they would be homeless. Friends are only willing to help so much before they stop, and I would rather go without if I can than have my friends think of me as relying on them financially. I have had ingrown toenails on both of my big toes for longer than I can remember. I make too much to go to the low-cost clinic, but not enough to go to the hospital because the emergency room is simply too expensive. I had an ear and tooth infection last year that I hoped didn't spread to my head because I wouldn't be able to afford the medication or time off work. I'm tired of being poor. Story 23. The biggest thing most people don't understand is the pure stress of being poor. Spending most of your waking hours trying to figure out how you will pay your bills and manage to eat. Sometimes you have to go hungry for a day or two just so your heat or internet doesn't get cut off. Story 24. A wealthy person's worst-case scenario is a poor person's best-case scenario. I have distant family members who are multimillionaires, and they experience anxiety attacks thinking about flying in economy class or sending their children to public school. It is unbelievable. Story 25. Not what I would consider poor anymore, but as someone who has experienced rural poverty, the stress of being one car breakdown away from homelessness takes years off your life. Story 26. This may be a little off topic, but here it goes. If you are wealthy, you have the time to take acting classes, practice music, or paint and sculpt. This allows you to hone your artistic skills and gives you the freedom to audition and showcase your pieces. You also likely have better connections that can help you achieve notoriety and success. Try being a talented artist in any of the aforementioned fields while also working full-time to survive and pay the bills. I know it does happen for a select few who manage to succeed, but those cases are rare. I have met many talented musicians over the years who were capable of being on the radio and probably would have made it if they had the same connections as artists from wealth. It is also important to recognize that nepotism often prevails in the entertainment industry. Story 27. We aren't all getting Starbucks every morning. Stop trying to sell us on that business model for saving. Story 28. Individuals with low income have just as much of a right to vote in their interests as anyone else. If you want to vote for lower taxes for property owners, that is acceptable, but you cannot expect individuals with low income to agree with you. Story 29. I want them to realize they could save my life in an instant, and it wouldn't affect their bottom line. The can of worms is actually a bottle of worms with a twisty cap. Story 30. Just because some people can and do work their way out of poverty with smart choices doesn't mean everyone can. All the personal discipline in the world can be derailed by an unexpected pregnancy, a sudden medical problem, a large and unexpected bill, or any other real-life surprises. With a supportive network of friends and family, some people can weather these surprises. However, if you're isolated or if your social network consists mostly of people in even harder circumstances, it can be incredibly difficult to overcome even small setbacks. If you're not fortunate, problems like these can compound. A temporary illness might cause you to miss work, get fired, lose your apartment, and end up living in a car. I dislike it when someone shares the "I got out of poverty" story as if it somehow invalidates the lives of those who weren't so lucky. Story 31. The reduction of options defines the difference between the wealthy and the poor. I have known a few wealthy individuals, and they shared a similar outlook. When they observed a happy person with limited financial means, they would think that life isn't that hard for them. However, that person made choices within their limited options and found happiness. People with fewer options often struggle more to find happiness, as money does not directly buy happiness. It buys options. A wealthy person can choose from many options and still end up unhappy, while a person with fewer resources can make choices that lead to happiness. The odds are against those with limited means in finding happiness due to this reduction in options. The existence of happy individuals with lower financial means does not imply that being poor is enjoyable. Story 32. Not everyone can simply get a better job. If there were enough better jobs available, which there are not, everyone pursuing those would lower the wages for those positions, leaving no one to do the undesirable jobs. Being poor is essentially a trap. Once you're in that situation, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to escape. Story 33. Buying good clothes at a low price is better than buying the same clothes at a high price. I even had a disagreement with a child who did not agree with that. Story 34. I receive supplemental security income and get less than $1,000 a month to live on. There is no assistance available despite what people say. I would need to have a child or be a migrant to receive any form of help, as I was told by a caseworker. My health does not allow for that. Low-income housing can be dangerous for anyone who is immunocompromised and suffers from lung and heart problems. The cigarette smoke, mold, and pests ensure that. So, people like me, those who are disabled, do not receive help. We are being left homeless or placed into housing that is detrimental to our health. Story 35. Banks penalize individuals with low balances. You incur bank fees for insufficient funds in your account, for bounced checks, and for going into overdraft. It truly costs money to be poor. Story 36. If someone arrives at a job interview looking disheveled, it might indicate they use public transportation, cycle, walk, or a combination of these methods. It doesn't mean they are unemployable. In fact, consider the positive aspect. They have already endured challenges for your company. It might also suggest that they never miss work due to vehicle issues. Story 37. The idea that we are not working hard enough is a misconception. We are on our feet from 9 to 5, sometimes even longer, being belittled by customers and bosses and treated like replaceable parts in a machine. The reason we cannot get any richer is that corporations are making more and more money while refusing to raise wages for their workers. I would be fortunate if I could ever afford a down payment on a house like many working-class people. Story 38. Their level of disconnect from the average person is staggering, to the point where it is almost incomprehensible for them. They seem incapable of empathizing or putting themselves in anyone else's shoes to grasp just how out of touch they truly are. I speak from firsthand experience, having interacted with many of them, and it is abundantly clear that this lack of understanding is deeply ingrained, especially when it comes to their children. The children of these wealthy individuals often grow up insulated from the realities that most people face. Their privileged upbringing can create a bubble of unawareness that further distances them from the experiences of ordinary people. It is a cycle of privilege that can perpetuate this disconnect across generations. Story 39. When one monkey hoards all the bananas, eventually, all the other monkeys will tear it limb from limb and divide the bananas. Story 40. After a certain point, you really don't need more money. You can already buy everything you want. Once you reach that point, you should be paying the people in your companies more instead of accumulating more wealth. Story 41. The actual value of a dollar is simple as that. In Illinois, Chicago elected a multi-billionaire, born into privilege, governor who is an heir to the Hyatt hotel chain. His latest out-of-touch proposal wants to remove the 1% grocery tax, claiming it would save poor people hundreds of dollars a year. How much food does he think poor people buy? Spending $100 on food incurs $1 in tax. Meanwhile, he raised the gas tax by an additional 19 cents a gallon and tied yearly increases to inflation. He also added $50 a year onto license plate fees, so whatever was saved is now consumed by other decisions he made. That 1% tax went back to local municipalities, and its removal will lead to significant deficits, from $30,000 for small towns to millions in lost income for larger cities. So, what do you think is going to happen to ensure cities don't lose money? That's right, we lose again. Story 42. It costs more to be poor than wealthy. When you reach a certain point of poverty, it becomes more expensive. Becoming poor can change you mentally and physically at a biological level. There are scientific papers in medical journals that document these facts. Stress from poverty can alter you at a cellular level. Story 43. That money does not buy happiness. It would solve all of my problems. I would be happy then because the problems I have would be gone, and I would be able to do what I want instead of what I need. Story 44. Wealthy people often share examples of individuals from low-income backgrounds who achieved success and became wealthy. However, for every person who succeeded, there are thousands who did not, and these stories are rarely discussed. Story 45. The expression, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, was originally used to refer to a task that is impossible. The laws of physics make it unattainable. Therefore, when people are told to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, it is a significant insult. Story 46. I wish corporate millionaires would do the right thing and stop giving themselves raises while raising worker wages. Yes, you are the CEO, and you should be paid more than other employees. However, you already make millions a year and likely have significant savings. Stop being greedy and give back to your workers. This is the essential perspective that needs to be understood to improve society for many people. Story 47. Their wealth may have come from a great idea, but they also had some luck, were at the right place at the right time, or had connections that made their success easier to achieve. It is possible to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but it takes a lot to become a millionaire, let alone a billionaire. Story 48. Poor people lack access to financial education. Basic concepts such as compound interest, taxes, and investments remain unfamiliar to them. This knowledge is often absorbed from parents, grandparents, or neighbors. Wealthy individuals, including those in the middle class, may not understand the dynamics of generational poverty. Story 49. That it is not caused by laziness. Most wealthy people in this current economy are rich due to generational wealth. They have never been in a situation where they have to live paycheck to paycheck or start from zero. They do not understand how hard it is to build from nothing in America's current economic state because they have been supported by their parents since they were born. The upper class, especially those holding certain beliefs, just assume that poor people do not work hard enough and that is why they are poor. Some individuals do not have the luxury of living with their parents while trying to secure a job or save money. Some individuals do not have the luxury of hiring someone to do their chores while they work long hours. Some individuals do not have the luxury of a college degree to help them obtain a good job, when attending college can be prohibitively expensive. Some individuals do not have the luxury of hiring a nanny to care for their children while they work full-time to provide for them. Some individuals do not have the luxury of receiving weekly allowances or occasional financial gifts from their families. Some individuals do not have the luxury of affording rent in this economy. Some individuals do not have the luxury of being able to work both day and night shifts. Some individuals do not have the luxury of access to healthcare. Poor individuals, if anything, work harder than wealthy individuals do, simply because they know that one slip-up could jeopardize everything they have worked hard to build. Story 50. Hard work does not necessarily guarantee success. Sometimes you may have a difficult supervisor, or there may be limited opportunities in your location. Story 51. Pay a living wage to afford a median-priced home, healthcare, food, clothing, and some discretionary income. Story 52. People are born into poverty, and many circumstances beyond a person's reasonable control can lead to poverty, especially if they do not come from a wealthy family. Many affluent individuals mistakenly believe that people are poor only due to a series of poor life choices. But that is not true. While some individuals may be in poverty due to laziness or poor decision-making, they are the exception, not the rule. Story 53. There is only so much to go around, and when they take far more than their share, they leave other people with little or nothing. However, I don't think they care. Story 54. Not poor anymore, but grew up on a budget and went through really tough times in college. When you have very little money, it changes your relationship with it. Funds were not a renewable resource, so saving for later was tough because you don't expect to have it later. Like feral animals that stuff themselves with as much food as possible because they don't know when they'll eat again, you buy things when you can. Paradoxically, taking advantage of sales rarely happened. I wouldn't buy deodorant when it was on sale to benefit from the savings unless I needed it immediately. I could have saved a lot by buying 3 deodorant sticks when it was on sale, But if I didn't need it at that moment, I couldn't take advantage of the sale by buying ahead of time because I could only spend on what I needed in the moment. Story 55. Saving money is impossible when the money you have goes towards simply existing. There are no vacations, no new clothes, and no fancy vehicles. Story 56. Being wealthy is not something you have achieved alone. Society requires support. Contribute your fair share so it can continue to improve. Story 57. If you have ever been poor, the stress and feeling that the rug will be pulled out from under you will never go away. Story 58. We are all in this together. You can never disconnect from society, no matter how many barriers you put up or how much security you have. Story 59. It is almost impossible to turn $1 into $1 million. Turning $1 million into $100 million is almost inevitable. Story 60. I wish wealthy people understood the challenges of living paycheck to paycheck, the stress of financial insecurity, and the lack of access to basic necessities. Story 61. Medicaid literally saved my life multiple times. They covered all my healthcare expenses, including my surgeries, doctors, and medications. The first time I got sick, my thyroid stopped functioning. I became so lethargic that I couldn't get out of bed, and I needed it removed. They took care of it, I recovered, and I became a functional member of society again. The second time it happened, a vein in my brain collapsed. I was catatonic for 2 years. Eventually, I received a stent, but I now have some minor brain damage. The government paid for my doctors, brain surgery, medications, rehabilitation, and everything else. I'm working on becoming functional again. I couldn't work through these events. If I had to worry about paying for all these medical expenses, I might have considered giving up. But I didn't have to. I made it through, I'm recovering, and I'm going to keep going, start working again, paying taxes again, and contributing back into the system that allowed me to survive. Universal healthcare is necessary because of stories like mine, so people can live without facing such dire circumstances. Story 62. Generational poverty versus generational wealth. Additionally, consider generational trauma. I am not using this as an excuse. I am simply stating that it is a real issue. Story 63. Even if tomorrow it starts to become much better, you are likely half a lifetime in debt. This is not just because you bought a house or a brand new car. Additionally, you may not appear happy due to the debt and pressure, as you can't even afford any activities. Story 64. I wish they would stop thinking that the money will be better used in my hands, and that I will do more good with it than anyone else. This belief is actually exacerbating the problems in our culture. Story 65. Luck is a significant factor in achieving wealth. Factors such as your location, access to opportunities, being favored by recruiters, and receiving encouragement can all play a role. While it doesn't imply that wealthy individuals haven't worked hard or developed skills beyond any inherited wealth, luck often explains their success compared to those who remain in poverty. It's important to recognize how the freedom that money affords influences one's perspective. I encourage a deeper understanding of the limited freedom and choices experienced by those with fewer financial resources. Story 66. Just because I am poor does not mean I am lazy. If I were lazy, I would not have weekly checks with 90 hours on them. Story 67. Grew up quite poor. If water costs $1 and you earn 99 cents, you cannot scrimp and save your way to $1. No amount of self-discipline can overcome a deficit in the cost of survival. You can borrow 1 cent to reach $1 and slowly descend into insurmountable debt. Story 68. There isn't even room to save any money for anything, and there's definitely no chance of investing because that money could go towards necessary bills, groceries, gas, and so on. Therefore, saving for a bigger purchase is out of the question. Story 69. Their generosity can change many people's lives, and most of us who aren't wealthy don't need to be taught a lesson about the importance of money. I'll never forget when I was on unemployment after graduating college during the pandemic, and my restaurant job was shut down. I was looking for a new laptop because I wanted to start my own business. My uncle, who is a millionaire in Los Angeles, frequently buys every new Mac and iPhone as they are released. He had a lightly used 2017 MacBook Pro that he was trying to get rid of. He offered it to me for $700, which I graciously accepted and paid for, as it was significantly discounted from what I would have paid in the store. Had he given it to me for free or as a graduation present, that small act could have been life-changing for me. That amount was equivalent to 2 months of rent at the time. Even small gestures that may not seem significant to them can provide those in need, like I was at the time, the support they need to begin saving. Story 70. I haven't been poor in decades, but one of the things that some people who were poor while going to college and immediately afterwards don't understand is the massive difference in how it feels when you have no expectations of clawing your way out of poverty. Working as a manual laborer with little expectation of ever escaping poverty has a very different impact than occasionally eating ramen as a college student with the expectation that in a few years, you will no longer be in poverty. Story 71. Don't ever use the phrase that you just need to work hard and you will achieve great things in life. Many people work much harder and are more talented and intelligent than others, but most of them will never reach the same level of financial success as someone who was born into wealth. This is often due to a lack of financial resources and opportunities that others may have. Story 72. While I was pregnant with our first child, my husband lost his job when I was 6 weeks along, and I lost mine at 6 months. We had just bought a house and invested all our money into it. One day, I went to Walmart to get out of the house and found a set of onesies on clearance for $5. I remember holding them up, admiring how cute they were, and wondering if we could afford them. 15 years later, I still have the onesies. They were the only baby clothes I bought by myself. We are very well off now, but that terrifying feeling of uncertainty about how we might raise a child remains at the forefront of my mind. I share this story when acquaintances make snarky comments about why others don't simply save or invest. Can happen to any of us. Story 73. It is expensive being poor. You cannot pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you cannot afford boots. We outnumber the wealthy, and one day we will have to consume them. Story 74. Even though I make a decent income, roughly around the median in a high cost of living area, I cannot go on vacation on a whim. Please stop asking. Story 75. Systems do not care about you when you face financial difficulties. I almost secured a job recently, but ultimately could not accept it because my disabled partner would lose all income, and I would not have made enough to support us both. It is very demoralizing. I understand why some people may consider suicide over these circumstances. Before anyone worries, I am not suicidal, but I understand the struggle. Story 76. Unfortunately, just as there is generational wealth, the same can be said for those who are less fortunate. My parents have never had much money, and this has definitely impacted me both financially and mentally. Story 77. The concept of enough. There comes a point where it becomes a monetary competition to see who can accumulate the most wealth, which is always to the detriment of the much larger population. I'm not suggesting that everything everyone does needs to be completely altruistic all the time. However, there is a level where the true amount becomes unfathomable to those with the money. Some label it as obscene while others view it as evil, but the end result is that it exceeds what any one person or family could ever truly use, even over generations. Once you reach the point of having more money than the gross domestic product of a prosperous country, an individual or a very small group is merely hoarding wealth that serves no purpose other than pride, when it could do so much good while still allowing the hoarder to retain substantial amounts of money. Story 78. Just because you have something and I do not, does not mean I am trying to take yours. Many people who are less fortunate have either given up on or were raised to not place too much importance on material possessions over relationships. If I am talking to you, it means I am interested in the conversation. Your wealth does not impress or entice me. Story 79. Investing in managed funds and considering yourself a professional investor is similar to hiring someone to cook for you and calling yourself a chef. Story 80. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. Story 81. Being broke is one of the most expensive situations to be in. Utility late fees, overdraft fees, unreliable cars that break down, and high payments due to bad credit can add up quickly. Borrowing money can be necessary when you live week to week or even day to day. Based on my unfortunate experience, Being broke is definitely costly. Story 82. If they are inherently wealthy, they could never begin to understand the waves of struggle. Story 83. Not everyone will have the same journey as you. What worked for you to achieve wealth may not work for many others. It is not as easy as some wealthy individuals may make it seem. Story 84. Everyone wants a bit more. The poorest want a bit more, the poor want a bit more, those who aren't quite scraping by want more, those who are doing fine want more, those who are living comfortably want more, those who are living lavishly want more, and those who are at the peak of society want more. The difference between them is that more for some is $50 a week, while more for others is $50,000 a week. The desire is equal, but the amount needed to advance their positions is not. 1,000 people receiving $50 more can have a much more positive effect in the world than one person making millions receiving 50,000 more. Furthermore, no one deserves anything at all. Nothing. No one deserves anything equally. Story 85. Being wealthy isn't a sign of intelligence, hard work, or talent. There are countless brilliant and ambitious people for every billionaire. The difference is that billionaires happen to be on the tracks when the wealth train hit them, often before they were out of diapers. Story 86. If money isn't buying them happiness, then they're doing it all wrong. All my problems stem from not having money. Story 87. Oh, trust me, they understand, which is why they have armed security everywhere they go and associate with corrupt district attorneys and the Department of Justice. Story 88. Not having money is one of the worst things you can experience. Not being able to go out with friends and worrying about paying bills while constantly working from 9 to 5 until you're numb is a struggle. It can be hard to breathe sometimes because the whole world feels like it's on your shoulders, and you're just one bad day away from breaking. But you can't break because there are people who depend on you. If you fall, they fall, so you end up bending over backwards to provide for the ones you love. You never stop. Vacation is a dream, and financial freedom is a myth. Sleep is a forgotten concept, and pain is something we are all too familiar with. What frustrates me is when wealthy people complain. They have money, food, a home, and not a care in the world. True pain is something they know nothing about, but feel free to step into my shoes anytime, and I would be more than happy to introduce you to it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.